Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Thursday coffee chat. Hope you're doing well and enjoying the second week of remote classes. And it's been good to get to see many of you on Skype or Zoom if we've met, or through cable or classes or other things that we've been doing. And for those of you who are doing YU interviews, it's been fun to get to do those with you starting this week, and we'll continue with that next week. Again, every Tuesday and Thursday, we'll hop online here at 1 o'clock and talk a little bit about some sort of professional related topic. And we've been doing that last week, and we'll continue that this week. And today I'm actually going to be shifting focus a little bit from professional topics. I've mentioned that I'm going to do these over topics that you all regularly come and meet with me about in my office. But today I'm going to shift focus and also start incorporating some articles from places like FastCompany, New York Times, or Wall Street Journal. So they have a lot of career and professional development related content that they push out, and I think it's really helpful for you. And so I'm going to start today by talking about an article from FastCompany. So I'm going to try to make the video a little shorter today than it usually is, so that you have some time to spend reading the article and thinking through that. So I'll post the link to the FastCompany article in the post and on the video on YouTube, so that you can take some time to read that. And as always, if you have a question or a comment about anything that I say or that the article talks about, feel free to put it in the comments on Facebook or on YouTube, and I'll be sure to respond to that. Today, the article that we're going to focus on is talking about your professional relationships, otherwise known in business speak as networking. Networking is kind of that thing that's often kind of the lull in the background because it's just, we hear it so much, in classes, whenever we have alumni speakers, whenever we talk about how to, what's a good strategy to get an internship. I'm sure you have heard often and more times than you'd like to count that it's all in the networking. And in many cases, that's true. But we hear it so much, especially if you're in cable or Business 365 or one of those other programs where we talk about networking a lot. It just becomes we become so used to hearing it that it kind of becomes that like law in the background that we don't often think about. We know it's important, but we hear about it and it kind of becomes that cliche thing. And so I thought it'd be good to spend some time looking at this article from FastCompany and just thinking about how to best maintain and manage our professional relationships that we have built and that we don't even know we have. So the article is titled 8 Tips to Build, Maintain, and Leverage Your Professional Relationships. And it's been written by a FastCompany writer named Sachin Waikar, who is quoting Stanford graduate from the Stanford School of Business, Rebecca Zucker. So they come up with 8 or so recommendations on how to build, manage, and leverage those relationships that you might have. I talk all the time about how a company, they, especially larger companies, they may have 100, 150 applicants for any given position. And they may have a stack of resumes, and they may only actually pursue 5 to 6 of those applicants in detail, meaning they only offer interviews to 5 or 6 of them. And, obviously, your resume, your professional presentation, how you apply, like your communication, like all of those things can help you rise to that stack of 100 to 150 resumes and your experience that you show on those documents. But it's also good to realize that at times, some companies even have internal influence, meaning people that you network with can help you rise even higher in that job search process. I know the company I used to work for in Dayton, they used to have what they called employee referrals. So, if I were an employee of the company inside and I referred someone to the company, there was usually a lot more preference given to those applicants than, say, any of the other 60 who just applied out of the blue online. So while it's not always the case that networking is going to be able to make you stand out in a interview or a job search process at every company, it is a pretty big key component that will help differentiate you. If in certain circumstances. So it's good to just think about that and to not write it off. So I'm going to go through briefly the 8 recommendations or the 8 tips that the article talks about, and I may give an example or story for a couple of them. I'm just going to try to summarize them, and then I have a quick point about networking and relationship building at the end that I'll give, and then I encourage you to read the article. So let's get started. The first tip or recommendation that the article lays out is to take a broad approach to your networking or relationship building. And this doesn't mean connecting with anybody and everybody, as if you're going on LinkedIn and just hitting connect. And it doesn't necessarily mean that, you should be, just stop people in the mall and ask them where they work necessarily. Who knows? Maybe that's your strategy and that's fine, I guess. But really, this is meaning that you should never write people off. Anyone that you come into contact with or that you engage in any sort of manner, you shouldn't write them off because you never know who you may be able to help or who may be able to help you in the future. People you never expected when you met them may all of a sudden, 10 years down the line, be the contact that makes the difference in your next step in your career, which is important to know because, the job market is changing so fast these days that I think if you ask most people who are 10 to 15 years into their career at the moment, the thing they would probably tell you right off the bat is that they probably didn't expect to be where they are in the field that they are in and the work or the job or the type of position that they are in when they were graduating college. And that's just the reality of what we call the job market these days. You're going to have changes and pivots in your career because the market is changing so fast. And so just because someone who you interact with today or who you interacted with, a couple years ago may not be someone that is relevant for your network at the moment and someone that you can help or that they can help you. It doesn't mean that that won't be the case 10 to 15 years from now. So it's important to take a broad approach and to not write people off when you meet them because, we like to make judgments of who, when we meet people about, who they are and, whether they're a good fit to be in relationship with us and things like that. And it's good to just think that to never, one, write people off and to not harm relationships, even if they don't seem like they could be, beneficial for us in that moment or helpful, for us to help or for them to help us. So never write people off. The second thing that the article talks about is that momentum in networking is, they call it multiplicative. And I like to think of this as a tree because as in the same way that you can never know who might be helpful or a good contact for you to have a relationship with in the future, you also never know who those people can connect you with who might also be helpful. And so, we know people, and those people that we know other people. And so through our network, we can build this sort of tree or web, maybe it's a better terminology to use, web of networked relationships that are helpful for us. We don't know everyone and we never will know everyone, but that doesn't mean that people we know can't help us meet other people that would be more in line with someone that we can either add value to or they can add value to us. I talk about this because my first job, when I worked my first full-time job working for another institution, I worked with an individual there who said that, every time that they made a networked connection with someone in their field or, someone that they knew or built a relationship with, they would always ask that question of, who's the next person that that I should know and be in contact with. And I thought that was interesting because, we don't actually think in those terms when we actually meet and network with people. That our networking relationship isn't just a two-way street in between two individuals, but that really the person we're talking to and ourselves are also potential opportunities to connect each other to other people. And so I think that's a good way to think about it, that as you're making these connections, your network can multiply pretty quickly if you're focused on trying to meet new people and to asking those relevant questions about who other people might know or who people might know in a specific field or specific role. So it's good to think about those questions. I got that first job. I mentioned the person I knew that would ask those questions in networking situations, and I got that job in a similar way. I was looking for a position at the moment, and I knew a VP of the organization who connected me with another VP of the organization who ended up having a job that was relevant for me. And so I ended up getting that position because my network, multiplied in just those few short months that I was searching, that allowed me to get from one connection to the other that ended up leading to a job at the end of the day. So it's good to think about that in the way that you're not only do you not know if those people you're communicating with will be relevant connections for you in the future, but who also could they connect you to? So it's good to think about those things in terms of your networking. The third thing they list is to harness the strength of your weak ties. Now, the article references research by Mark Granovetter, who talks about how, weak ties, people that, we are not in contact with on a daily basis, but people that we may know through an organization, or, people that, we at least know each other's name. Maybe we work at the same company, or we used to be volunteering for the same local community organization, but we never really hit off a connection. And those would be people that you would call weak ties. And this research that the article cites talks about how often when people leverage and use their weak ties, it often leads to more satisfying work. So it often leads them to receive or to be, to have a position later on in life that leads to more satisfying work for them. I would also recommend a book by Adam Grant called Give and Take, who talks, really the whole book is about building relationships and networking with each other, but he also talks about this concept of weak ties in that book. And he describes them as, strong ties are those people who run in the same circles that we do. There's the people that we interact with on a daily, weekly, regular basis. And the people that we'd call tomorrow if we needed something, those strong ties. But he also identifies strong ties as people who are relatively similar to us. Typically, those people we are well connected with, their personality-wise, career-wise, like work-wise, we all share some sort of similar interests at the moment. And that the weak ties are really the spot that we gain the more diverse network, the more diverse perspective. And we'll talk about diversity in a little bit. But it's our weak ties who provide that different range of perspective than maybe our strong ties would, because the weak ties are people who don't necessarily run in those same circles that we do and may not necessarily work in the same industry or the same positions that we do. And so it's always good to think about who is in our network that are those weak ties, that when we need a difference of opinion, difference of perspective, or we're thinking about having a completely different shift in our career path, who are those people that we could reach out to? And again, it's also good to think in terms of who you can benefit as well. Networking is not just something that you do to claim value, but you should also be thinking about ways that you can add value. And that's one of the last points that we'll make from the article today. But yeah, harness the strength of weak ties. The fourth tip or recommendation that the article mentions is to don't be afraid to reconnect. Part of the problem with networking is that people think that it only happens at networking events and when a need arises. But in reality, you need to manage your network and manage your contacts and manage your relationships. You don't only contact your family members who you have relationships with when you need something. You have, family gatherings, and you talk to them probably regularly, and you email them and call them and just to check in and see how things are going. And you should do something similar with your contacts, because, the ability of people to pour into your life and for you to pour into theirs changes as time goes on. And you don't want your connections that you've worked so hard to build to kind of fade away, and for people to really forget, their interaction with you, or you to forget that your interaction with them. I always say it's best to have a database of people, a spreadsheet, or some place where you can track those people you are connected with and keep hold of their contact information and where they work and what industry they're in and what they're doing and how you met them, and also to keep track of when's the last time you talked to them. And you may want to make a habit of going through a database or a contact list of those people that you've come into contact with that, maybe you send a message every, year or 6 months or so to some of those weaker ties and just say, hey, thinking about you, hope you're doing well. I'd love to get coffee sometime, just so you can kind of keep the communication going, and that your database doesn't necessarily become outdated to the point where it's not really, a wealth of relationships for you. So don't be afraid to reconnect. People love to check in and hear how people are going, hear how people are doing, and to see what's changed in 6 months to a year. And so meeting up for coffee with a contact that you met a year ago just to update each other on your lives and what you're currently doing is really valuable, because one, we need people to talk about our work and to talk about what things we have accomplished and what struggles we're having with just in general, and it's also good to keep those relationships alive. The fifth thing about networking, or the tip that they offer, is to always make sure you identify yourself. And this is definitely important for people who are searching for internships or looking for doing informational interviews or things like that with their networking relationships. You always want to connect with people with a purpose. Obviously, like I said, connecting by just hitting connect on LinkedIn is probably not a good practice, because if you've never met each other before, you don't know each other, like you're just doing a blind connection. You're not actually connecting with purpose. It's always good to ensure that people know who you are and know, how and why you got connected with them, or why you want to be connected with them. Someone referred you to a new contact, mention that. Tell them, hey, so-and-so told me I really should get in touch with you because you can talk to me a little bit about this industry or this field. Those are all good things to just keep in mind when you're reaching out to people. The worst thing that students commonly do is they reach out to alums out of the blue and they just say, hey, do you have an internship for me? And likely that's going to be difficult. Depending on their position in the company and their ability to host an intern, they may not have the hiring authority to do that, but they may be able to tell you a little about their company. They may be able to tell you a little about their industry, and then through building the relationship, maybe they're willing to try to figure out what the next step that could be for them to help you. But they don't do that right off the bat. They don't do it just because they see your name, your picture, and where you went to school. You need to build the relationship with them and let them pour into you and tell, people love talking about their experience. And one of the easiest ways to build a strong network is to reach out to people and let them talk about themselves, because we all love talking about ourselves. And when we do that, we feel like others are interested in our own experience and in our own lives. It generally builds a stronger connection, and simply knowing more about you and your goals and what you're thinking about for the future, and having that identification among people you're connecting with is going to be helpful for them to be more willing to help you in the future. So the sixth thing that the article is referencing or recommends to everyone is to do what they call double opt-in introductions. And this is more for you if you're connecting people to others. It's easy for people to call someone up and just put someone else on the phone and say, here's someone I think you should meet. Or for people the article uses, you ask someone to connect you, or you want to connect two people together, so you send an email and copy them both in on it. It's always good when you're networking to make sure you're respectful of the relationship that you have built, and that you recognize that relationships or that connections in some ways are power. You being in contact with someone else and having the information, the phone number, the email address, the communication with a professional or someone in your network is a powerful thing. You have the power to email them, to call them, to reach out to them. And when you blindly just give that to someone else, it could betray trust between the person you've built that connection with. Especially, people in higher positions, they get a lot of communications on a day-to-day basis, and they're more than willing usually to network with people. But they want to protect their contact information because they want to make sure that they're able to manage the communications that they get. And so if you build a relationship with someone, or you have contact information for someone, make sure that you're asking permission, or making sure that someone is okay with you sharing their contact information before you just go off and do it. You want to make sure that both sides are interested in connecting before you just share some of that private information that you've been entrusted with. So when the article speaks of double opt-in connections, it's trying to make sure that we respect both the person we're trying to communicate with, contact information and willingness and time, because it's going to take time for them to reach out and talk to that person we're trying to connect them with. So making sure both sides are open and willing to the contact is always a good thing. The seventh thing that they recommend is aiming for diversity and then evolution in your network. And this is both like diversity from a demographical standpoint and diversity from a standpoint of where someone is at in their career and what fields they are in. Having more depth in your network is going to help you more than having 100 connections of people that are relatively the same. Perspectives are going to be different. Ability of someone, to be helpful is going to be different. And so you don't want to just connect with a stereotypical person that you think is going to be helpful for you. You want to make sure your contact list is both diverse from a cultural and demographic standpoint, and from a career path and level standpoint. All of those different things are going to add different perspectives and different meanings to your relationships that you wouldn't have if you just connected with one single type of person. And again, that goes back to that first point we talked about with the broad approach, where you want to have the most diverse networked body, so that you have all the information and perspectives that you need for your professional life. And the eighth recommendation that they make, and really it's probably the one I think is the most important, is think beyond yourself. And this I'll tie into my last point about networking in general. Adam Grant, that book that I mentioned, Give and Take, makes a big case for, it states that every time, we come into a networking situation or that we're connected with someone else, we have a choice to make. Are we going to try to claim as much value? Are we going to try to take away as much as we can from that scenario? Or are we going to do our best to try to add something in that interaction? Most people, when they think of networking, they think of it in economic terms. And you'll notice that in the business world, when we talk about networking, we speak of it in economic terms, meaning I give you this to get that, or I put in this in order to receive that return. And oftentimes, that is what happens. People provide value to someone else and then they end up helping them later or something like that. But it's important, and I even used in the beginning of this, from the start of this video until this last point, when we speak of networking, we often speak in that terms of that economic exchange. We're using terms like, how can they help me, or how can I help them? It's just natural for people when they talk about networking, and natural for us when we explain the concept of networking, to speak in that way. But it's also, good to think beyond yourself, as the article recommends. We're all humans in this situation, and we all have needs and things that we can offer. And if we're only allowed to do one of those things, if we're only allowed to ask people for something, or they're only allowed to give something, those relationships are only a one-way street. And it's best to think of our relationships as this as what really make up our professional lives. Our relationships that we build are the thing that give us the opportunity to be in relationship with other people. Our careers, our different work environments, our different companies that you're going to be working for someday are going to give you the outlet to both share with others and for them to share with you. And it's really important for that two-way street to happen, that it's not just a one-sided exchange where you are claiming and taking as much value away from the same person over and over again rather than providing something in return. And it doesn't mean that every interaction is going to have a two-way, it's not that every interaction is going to be a two-way street where you're always giving and taking in the same manner, but that you have that relationship where they provide you value and maybe a month later you have something you can offer them. And, it's important for you while you're in college to know that you do have something to offer. You have a different perspective. You have skills and abilities from the internships that you're doing, from the job opportunities that you have, from sometimes the thing that you can offer the best is to just allow people to tell you about themselves. We all need a way to talk about us, and you providing that opportunity and that outlet for someone to think that to talk about themselves in a way that makes their career feel meaningful is just as much of something that you can offer as your experience or your abilities. So I just end this before allowing you to read the article itself and to take away from it what you can by saying, always remember that relationships are more than just an economic exchange where you put in something and you get something in return. Relationships are often, networking and relationships and connections in your professional life, they're often a little bit mysterious to us. And we should always not only be looking for how we can use our network to better ourselves, but how we can take our experience and, what we have to offer to help other people. And it's that two-way exchange that happens over multiple, instances of connecting with someone. That really is the point that makes networking so successful for someone's career. People love helping others and feeling like they're giving back, and people also love that people respond when they need something in return. And so it's important to be intentional about building your relationships and to not treat them as just expendable, opportunities in your professional life, but they're really those things that are going to allow you an avenue to share of yourself to someone else and to provide them something that may be useful for them in the future, and also for them to be able to do that for you. I think that's enough for today. Hopefully you're building your network, and if you have questions about networking, please feel free to comment them in the comment section here. But I'll post the link to the article and take a look and read. I think it's really helpful for you for the future. And have a good rest of your week. I will see you again on Tuesday. Thanks.